Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I could say good evening, London, because I'm not allowed to say good morning, London, as often as I once was. But the reason I'm here is not to talk about me. I'm here.
Talk about you a bit.
Well, we'll talk about me a bit if you want, Don. But I'm here to talk about this gentleman, and I'm here to talk about this particular record, and we'll do a mix of a bit of both of those. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction, as if the Rebel Dread Don Letts needs any introduction at all. I first met this man, although he certainly wouldn't remember me, when I walked into Acme Attractions to buy a pair of plastic sandals. And I came out with a pair of plastic sandals and the impression that I'd met just about the coolest guy in London. The plastic sandals didn't last very long, but thankfully Don did. And Don has been the coolest guy in London, and Don has been one of the great London agents provocateurs, if you like. It's really difficult to describe what Don does. He's a filmmaker, he's a selector, he's a creator, he's a provoker, and he's all of those things.
You miss DJ.
Well, yeah, I was about to say he has a great radio show.
Filmmaker.
I started with filmmaker. For God's sake, I didn't miss that one. How could I miss that?
He even pretended to be in a band one time.
And that was a great band. I mean, one of the best gigs, one of the gigs, you know, of the millions I've seen that sticks in my head most was when BAD reformed, and I saw them when they first formed many times. I took my son, who's now 25, to his first ever gig to see BAD at Shepherd's Bush. Yeah, he's a QPR fan, so Mick Jones was there, and it was a home gig. And it's still one of the gigs that I remember and he remembers to the end of these days, because this man knows his stuff. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Don Letts.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, Don, we're here because of this, which is the version Excursion. And it's... How do you describe it? Because I've tried to do so and I can't quite manage it. Is it remixes? Is it versions? Is it dubs? Is it... what do you think it is?
Dubbed out bass-heavy covers. Isn't that what it says on the cover?
Probably does.
Yeah, that's what it does. What it says on the label. Yeah. Dubbed out bass-heavy reggae covers.
And was your job to select them, create them? Because there's a mix of both on here, isn't there? There's some, you know, lots of classics, and there's a more than usual percentage of kind of new stuff.
Yeah. I was approached by Late Night Tales, who I wanted to work together from the get-go to come up with something that, you know, might be appropriate for the label. And pull this out of the bag. I mean, I've had a love for reggae music. I think listeners to my radio show will know that. That was a plug. And particularly dub, which I discovered at a very early age through tracks like King Tubby Meets the Rockers' Uptown. And it's interesting, you know, I'm obviously black British, which kind of rolls off the tongue now, but it was a confusing thing when I was growing up. But, you know, as a kid, I had sort of the reggae, bass-heavy stuff coming in one ear, but in the other ear, I was listening to what my white mates were listening to, and that was the emerging pop music. And it struck a chord with me, man. You know, I mean, bands like the Beatles were a big part of my life.
Boo.
No, listen, hey. He says boo. For me, I was so in love with the Beatles that at one point of my life, I had the second largest collection of Beatles memorabilia in the UK. You know, but what I'm basically saying, that love of pop music, you know, it awoken my taste for melodies, harmonies and hooks. But that wasn't the sum total of my musical experience, because I had the reggae and dub thing going on as well. So this is a good example of putting all that shit together to reflect my musical journey, I guess.
And that relationship between pop music...
That makes sense?
Yes.
Good. Fucking hell.
It did. I'll tell you if you're not making sense, Don. That relationship between pop music and reggae and dub has always been there, hasn't it? If you go back through the story of Jamaican music, they're hearing things on the radio, they're nicking them, they're doing their own versions, they're often not credited on the sleeve. But that's been what Jamaican artists have done throughout history.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the artists that I grew up loving, whether it be Burning Spears and your Bob Marleys and all the rest of it, you know, they weren't living in a a bubble, you know, the bubble of Jamaica. They were open to what was going on around the world. How else does somebody like Bob Marley end up doing a version of What's New Pussycat? You know, no, it's true. I mean, and, you know, a lot of the early harmony groups were copying the doo-wop stuff that was going on.
Or the Impressions.
Or the Impressions.
Yeah.
So they were also very in tune with melody and harmony, but they liked to juxtapose it with that heavy bass line. And bass, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, it's Jamaica's gift to the world, man. You know, really.
It's given us a few.
I ain't lying. And also those sonic experiments that those dudes created all the way back then, they're kind of now part of the fabric of popular music. You know, the emphasis on bass and the rhythm, the whole thing with the mic. You know, I mean, that all started in Jamaica.
If someone had never heard a dub record and they said to you, what is this dub? How would you describe it? What, is it a process? Is it a mindset? What is it?
It's bass-heavy music created out of studio techniques that employ things like echoes, dubs, and phasers. And it's sort of where the bass takes center. Drum and bass kind of takes center stage. And I think, you know, the most profound thing that the Jamaicans did was use the mixing desk as an instrument in of
they
itself.
played the studio, if you
exactly right. So, you know, the sonic experiments of people like Lee Scratch Perry and
Rest His Soul,
King Tubby and Bunny Lee and all the rest of them, that's what they were into, yeah, the sonics of the studio. And they turned that into an art form. You've got to realise, you know, Lee Scratch Perry, right, a lot of his early albums were made with just 2 4-track tape recorders, and he'd bounce between the two. You know, and it's very much punk rock, because it was the lack of what they had that made them so creative.
Absolutely. Let's talk about punk rock, and let's talk about that interface between...
Well, Jamaica, sorry to interrupt you there, but through punk, I came to realise that the invention of reggae was Jamaica's punk rock.
Yeah.
No, seriously, like the guys couldn't do the fancy Eric Clapton stuff, but they could hold a chord and strum, and they turned that into an art form. Transpose that onto a keyboard, same thing, you know, ka-chaka, ka-chaka. Same thing on the mic. Brother can't sing, so he turns chatting into an art form. That's all punk rock, turning problems into assets.
Well, there's certainly a big argument that says hip-hop really comes out of Jamaican music, doesn't it? I mean, there's a direct lineage back to toasting, which, you know, predates all of that.
Absolutely. I mean, people like Kool Herc, who famously took the 2 turntables and the microphone to the streets, was of Jamaican descent.
Yeah.
You know, as were people like Busta Rhymes and Biggie Smalls and that. So Jamaica's had a big contribution to hip-hop.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I'm not just saying this. The first time I ever saw kind of hip-hop in New York, amazing as it was, and there was blokes spinning on their heads and all of this sort of stuff, I just thought, hold up, I saw that in Ladbroke Grove about 6 years ago in a slightly different form.
That's because they were on crack.
Let's talk about that kind of punk reggae interface, because this is one of those sort of interesting moments to which, you know, you are considered to be for blame.
Yeah, can I address that?
Yeah, go on.
Because, you know, if you read the press these days, like, Don Letts turned on a generation of punks onto reggae. It's a load of bollocks, really. I mean, the people I turned on to reggae back in the late 70s were all the white folk that didn't interact with black people. And I guess in the late 70s, that was a lot of white people.
There were quite a lot of those.
But you've got to give props to labels like Trojan, that launched in 1968. Same year that Enoch Powell made that Rivers of Blood speech, by the way. And it's interesting, because Enoch's freaking out all the old white people with his politics, that old trick. And at the same time, it's the music of Trojan that's captivating the imagination of my white mates. And it's really Trojan that sowed this country's love affair with Jamaican music. So long before Don Letts played reggae at the Roxy, people like he was Johnny Rotten as he was known then, your Paul Simonons, your Terry Halls and all the rest of them, they were hip to reggae, man. You know what I mean? I just part of an ongoing dynamic.
I mean, I can absolutely testify for that, because my story is I grew up in, you know, Northwest London family, 2 elder brothers, house full of reggae records and soul records and ska records, and then I become a punk rock, much to the chagrin of my mother. And I go down the Roxy, and as much as I enjoyed, you know, loved watching the Clash or watching the Pistols, walking into the Roxy and suddenly hearing reggae, I'm back with the music I grew up with. that's much more the sound that I knew. And you're absolutely correct. It wasn't that this was the first time we were hearing reggae. It was taking us back to the music that most of those people, if you were white working class or black working class in London in 1970, you danced to Young, Gifted and Black and Dave and Ansel Collins and all of that, you know, the Liquidator and...
I guess I have to add that, you know, while they recognised reggae through the Trojan stuff, I did bring in a lot of these kind of dub mixes
which was very different.
Yeah, which they wouldn't have heard before. And it's interesting, you know, the reason I played reggae at the Roxy is because when I got the gig, there were no UK punk records to play. So what's the guy to do? I'm going to play what I like. I'm playing hardcore dub reggae, and lucky for me, punks loved it. They liked the fact that the music was kind of anti-establishment.
It's rebel rock.
It's rebel rock. They liked the fact that the lyrics had a kind of musical reportage quality. You know, they're singing about shit that meant something. They obviously liked the bass lines, as typified by bands like The Clash, later on Public Image and The Slits.
Yep.
And it has to be said, they did not mind the weed either. You know, there was some serious cultural exchange going on at the Roxy.
Did that cultural exchange ever go the other way? I know Marley made, you know, punky reggae party.
I'm glad you asked that. I mean, it's obvious to see what the punks got out of the relationship. Maybe not so obvious to see what reggae got out of it, but I'll tell you what they got out of it. What reggae got out of the whole thing was exposure.
Yeah.
And that's all the brothers and sisters needed.
Yeah.
Because they could do the rest. Because on the back of the whole punk interest, you had things like Virgin launched the Frontline label, for instance.
Yeah, great compilation.
You know, and then out of that punky reggae mix, you had the bastard child of that, which was Two Tone. You know, so yeah.
Let's come on to Don Lett's musician, band member. I know you balk at the term musician.
Yeah. Oh, I'll tell you what, Gaudi, if I write lyrics, does that count as a musician? Does it?
Gaudi,
I've always
ladies
felt
and
like an
gentlemen,
imposter.
Gaudi is one of the people involved in this record over here, one of the top tracks on the record as well.
I'll just qualify why I'm wincing here, folks, because I was in this band called Big Audio Dynamite and famously couldn't play anything. True. I mean, I'd go on stage with the band in front of 80,000 people supporting you too, and sometimes the spirit would move me and I'd hold up my keyboard and show everybody, look, I've got fucking stickers on my keyboard. You know, that was punk rock. But I mean, the band was famous for all this.
Was the keyboard plugged in?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the band was famous to a degree for a lot of this whole sample and dialogue thing, which I was responsible for because I couldn't play anything. But I quickly realised you don't get paid for stealing other people's shit. And with Mick's help, threw myself into writing lyrics. E = MC squared, actually, on this.
Yeah.
It's the first song I wrote with Mick.
Which... I haven't heard all of the album yet, but I've certainly heard that, and I've played that a couple of times now on my show. How did that one come about?
That was Gaudi's idea, actually. I would have never... You know, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. And Gaudi, musician, producer extraordinaire, said, why don't we try a dub version? Because the thing is, Late Night Tales, they don't like to just bang out a bunch of tracks that anybody can put together. They like to go the extra mile and do some exclusives and original stuff. Gaudi came up with the idea, and... we brought in Emily Capel, and boom, it's on there.
Emily's also a QPR fan, I would just add.
But respect to Gaudi.
There's a direct lineage here, and respect to Gaudi, who's over there as well, we were just talking about.
Now, Gaudi is great, believe me.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? The way that that music from Jamaica, this tiny island, has travelled so far, and yet somehow, almost in Jamaica... you don't hear that music. You hear what they're listening to now. They're almost not quite cognizant of their own traditions, if you like.
You know, that's a really good point. You know, I often say to people, if you look at a map of Jamaica, right, a map of the world, and look at Jamaica, it's this tiny little dot that spent hundreds of years under colonization. Fast forward to the 21st century, and that tiny little dot has culturally colonized the planet. You know, punching far beyond its weight. I don't know what that's about, but the sonic lessons and things that they came up with all the way back when are still very much making waves around the world. I mean, there's sound systems around this entire planet, man. I went to a festival in Croatia, Sound System Festival. 200 sound systems, I only recognise 4 of them. In France, it's absolutely massive. And it ain't some kind of pale imitation. they're bang on it. I mean, I've never seen so many white people with dreadlocks in my goddamn life.
You should go to Bristol.
And it's funny, they're talking to me. I meet these guys in France, I'm like, yeah, man, Rastafari. Ja. I'm like, what, mate? And they look at me like, it's fun. Talk about culture clash.
Oh, well, let's talk about cultural appropriation, if you like, because this is a tricky subject at the moment, Dom. What do you think about all of that?
I don't think about it. For me, it's about whether it's appreciation or appropriation, you know. Nothing comes out of a void, man. You know, and I think, you know, rock and roll itself was created by a bunch of white guys trying to copy black guys, getting it wrong.
Elvis.
Getting it wrong and coming up with something else. So for me, an aspect of it is part of the creative process. On the other side of that coin, you've always had the business that have been trying to monetize it. And that battle's been going on from the get-go. And it's down to the individual to work out whether it is appreciation or appropriation. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah, but I think what we cannot do,
or exploitation, really.
Yeah. Which is never right and never acceptable.
No. But it's always been there.
But otherwise, you
Elvis.
wouldn't have madness, and you wouldn't have selector, and you wouldn't have
Exactly right,
and all of that, would you? I mean,
well, you know, who wrote the Stones' first hit, man?
Exactly, Bobby Womack.
Bobby Womack.
Exactly. I knew the answer to that one, Don. I'm glad. Let's talk about Don Letts, the DJ. And is it very different being a radio DJ and a club DJ? Are they very different processes?
Oh, yeah. I couldn't do what I do on the radio out on the road. Why is that? Because you can't do that shit. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, my show, while half of it has you moving and grooving, a lot of it's going sideways. But I really enjoy that culture clash thing. You know, when they asked me to do it, they asked me to do a reggae show, and I'm like, dude, that's not the sum total of my experience. And I asked them to let me do what I want to do, which they've let me do for going on 20 years now, man. And in a weird way, it's kind of the most honest thing I've ever done. Yeah, I'm not being punk Don Letts. I'm not being a reggae Don Letts. I can just be me. You know, and it's really liberating. You know.
I mean, I would, you know, as someone who's also...
I ain't that one-dimensional, man.
As someone who's also presented a radio show occasionally, I'm terrified of going out and DJing in nightclubs or DJing in any kind of live situation.
I love it. Yeah, but
I know you love it.
I love it because it's very
you're
much
good at it.
It's very much in the spirit of what I did at the Roxy. I'm basically turning on people through my culture, and for me, it's a kind of cultural exchange. And it also is good for my head because I'm not one of these people like music was better in my day. There's always something going on, man.
Always.
You know, what is it? It was Joe Strummer. He said, you just got to make sure your bullshit detector is finely tuned. But there's always something going on.
I mean, that thing of... But the reason that I'm kind of not scared... Scared might be the right word, of DJing in clubs is you can tell if they don't like it. If you're on the radio in a studio, you don't know. They might all be shouting at the radio at home, but you've got... That's a rubbish record, Robert. Why are you playing that? But if you're in a club, you can see their responses instantly. And if they don't dance, or if the dance floor clears, or whatever.
I wouldn't know about that, Robert. Actually, it's bollocks. I actually say you're not a proper DJ unless you play to one man and a dog, and I've done both.
Did the dog like it?
The dog walked out as well.
Well, let's go back to the BAD thing. I mean, did you enjoy that period? Did you like being a rock star?
What's not to like? Hanging out with your mates, you're travelling around the world, everyone's throwing the best that every city can offer at you in a really small space of time. I'd do it tomorrow, man.
Would you?
Oh,
so can we expect a BAD gig?
No, Mick can't be asked. No, don't blame him. He's done his thing 2 times over, and, you know, I love the brother. I feel really privileged to have gotten to write some songs with him. I can tell you that. I'm really proud of that stuff.
That BAD stuff struck me at the time, I have to say, and certainly now, as being very prescient. It was a foretaste of, you know, the sort of mix-ups that we're now used to, and the sort of mix-ups that this record is, really. That's what BAD were.
It's funny you should say that, because I had occasion to put together one of these record company anniversary things, which I thought, oh my God, this is going to be a pain in the arse. One of our albums, 25th anniversary, brilliant record company ideas. And the thing that saved the whole thing was I was like, oh shit, all the elements that we were playing with are still very much the things that turn me on today.
Yeah.
You know, the kind of heavy Jamaican bass lines, sort of hip-hop kind of drum beats, mixed rock and roll guitar, and all that sample and dialogue thing. I mean, they're still, basically what's going on today. Well, the shit that turns me on. Because a lot of this stuff today where people are shouting all day long does my head in, man. I can't take that shit no more.
Well, hold up. All right.
Unless they're making sense.
Let's talk about people shouting all day long. And,
No, I don't want to be hot. Right, go on.
No, this is just, Don and I were talking upstairs earlier on, and I was saying I grew up thinking of Jamaican music and Jamaican singers as having the sweetest voices. That vocal harmony tradition, the Gladiators and the Abyssinians and all of that stuff, and Slim Smith and just those wonderful, wonderful kind of Jamaican soul records. Where's that gone?
It ain't appropriate no more. Careful, we're in dangerous territory here. This is where we're about to sound like old men.
Don, we are.
No, listen. Listen, I'm cool with it. I'm 65 and fucking loving it. Old as rock and roll. I guess the language that the youth use these days is appropriate to their situation. I'm only dismayed because it's also fucking dark. But that might be their reality, I mean, a lot of the grime and all that kind of stuff. I mean, my thing is there's too many fucking men. Sorry, excuse my language. Anything that's just men, I kind of... I've never been to a football match in my life. Too many bloody men. I mean, I know women go, but I've never been. So I never understood that thing that was all about, a bunch of guys hanging out and shouting. But I guess in their world it makes sense, and I'm not in that world anymore, I'm on a sofa.
Here, though...
I fucking love my sofa.
I'm looking at the record, and there's people like Kiko Bun, and we mentioned Emily Capel, who's not a man, it has to be said. I'm very glad to say. There is, and even in Jamaica, if we look at Chronics and Protege and Coffee, there is a younger talent coming through, isn't there? And certainly here in London as well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about all that stuff, they realise that a lot of the hip stuff that's happening now is very disposable. Great in the moment, but not a lot of longevity.
Right at 3 o'clock in the morning if you're in it, yeah.
Yeah, but not a lot of longevity. But for the youth, it's about, a lot of them it is. I don't want to write off everyone, but for a lot of the youth, it's about moments and not movements. And that's that's an age thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah. In terms of putting this record together, did you... because as we said, quite a lot of these have been created specially. So how did you do those? Did you pick producers? How did it work?
A lot of phone calls and my black book connections. It kind of happened organically. I mean, for instance, I'll give you an example. There's a track on here that was written for Saturday Night Fever called Emotion that I loved. It was a lovers rock classic back in the day. It was actually created by Dennis Bovell, the dub maestro.
Who is a master, isn't he? I mean, Dennis is a marvellous man.
And this track was done by 1516, and he produced it. So I went to Dennis, and I'm like, Dennis, can you do a remix of this? You must have the track. And he laughed at me. He obviously didn't have the parts. Back in those days, for money-saving reasons, you mixed it down and got rid of the rest of the shit. Anyway, lucky for me, the Late Night Tales crew, the two Pauls, had this thing called a stem machine. Now,
what's that?
Dig this. A stem machine is some bit of technical wizardry that can take a mixed track and separate the individual parts. And I don't know if you understand what a trip that is. Now, there's things that have been out there that kind of do that to a degree. But whatever Late Night Tales has got, maxed it out, because it enabled Dennis to remix a track that he made 45 years ago. So his mind was blown by that. I did the same thing, Mad Professor's a mate, and there was a favourite track of mine, Never Find Dub, by John Holt. And I thought I'd love to get Mad Professor to do it. Rung up Trojan, can I have the parts? They laughed at me, and I should have known by now. Anyway, Stem Machine, Mad Professor, boom, an exclusive mix on that album.
John Holt, You'll Never Find Another Love is on there.
Yeah.
That record, I mean, one of my abiding memories, I don't know, what year did 1,000 Volts of Holt come out? I've got absolutely no idea.
72?
2, 3?
Yeah, around there.
I just remember, going around the streets of northwest London, going to mates' houses, and every house you went in, particularly if they were Jamaican, but even if they weren't, to be honest, there was a copy of 1,000 Volts of Holt, and it was playing usually when you went in the living room, and if their mum was there in particular.
It was
that's such a wonderful record, and yet no one talks about people like John Holt when they talk about reggae greats.
No, and he really was a precursor of the whole lovers rock thing.
Yeah,
and if
absolutely.
you don't know, lovers rock was a genre that's created specifically in the UK, actually.
London's been very... It's obviously, you know, reggae is Jamaican music, dub is Jamaican music, and we've talked about the globalisation of it. But London was kind of the second staging post, wasn't it? Or even more than that.
That's a good point, Robert. I'm glad you mentioned that. Fucking geezer. No, it's true. Reggae has been a gateway for Jamaican music, because it was only when, you know, I guess the black British youth picked up on it, you know, through Trojan, it has to be said. You don't realise Trojan released their first record in 68.
Trojan or Island, which is more important?
Well, Trojan started the whole ball rolling.
Yeah.
You know, in 69 they had their first chart hit, Red Red Wine, a cover version by
I only learnt that about 10 years ago that a white bloke had written that. I had no idea.
A white bloke, it's, come on, give him due respect. It's on brain work.
It's, what's he called?
Senior moment.
Neil Diamond.
Thank you. No, we've got to get, the guy's a master of music. I mean, come on. And then, anyway, after that, they had like, from 69 to about 74, there was a Trojan record in the charts nearly every month. An incredible run.
Unbelievable.
You know, and then after that...
They were based in Neasden.
That's right.
I mean, that's it. If you've never been to Neasden, it's not glamorous.
And then when the music switched from being kind of dance floor happy-go-lucky stuff and got a little bit more pro-black, a little bit more Rasta, Ireland picked up that mantle. Yeah. And then they took it to the next level.
If you were picking your favourite dub...
Don't. Come on, we're grown
I know
men.
this is always tough.
Like.
We're grown men and we've lived a long time. We've listened to a lot of music. In terms of, you know, we're here to talk about the version Excursion.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about dubs and remixes. You can choose ones that are on here, or you can choose ones that are just kind of, you know, in there.
What, favourite dubs?
Well, or favourite versions. I mean, is, for example, Hit the Road Jack, Big Youth, you know, is that up there?
I wouldn't say it's up there. It's almost comical for me, really. Because Big Youth was a toaster. In other words, kind of rapper. And that's him thinking he can sing. And actually invented a new word for these toasters that thought they could sing. They call them sing-jays. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it doesn't. But if you're going to pick up some dub albums, I'd highly recommend...
African Dub Chapter 3.
You got it.
Got the master.
Absolutely. You'd have to go to Lee Scratch Perry's Black Ball Jungle. Quite often mentioned as one of the first dub albums. And then Keith Hudson's Pick a Dub.
Ooh.
Absolute essential.
Ooh. Did you, I mean, obviously, you know, we've lost Lee Scratch Perry recently. Did you get to meet the man?
Several times. I even went to the burnt out remains of Black
did
Art
you?
Studio. Oh, yeah. No, that day I don't know.
Did you understand him in any sense? I interviewed him once.
Yeah.
And it wasn't one of the easier days of my life.
No, well, I had an edge on you, but, I mean, the dude was abstract. I mean, I often describe him as the Jamaica's Salvador Dali of sound.
The dude was abstract. What a great line.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
He was a surrealist.
Absolutely, like I say,
Like
Jamaica's
said,
Salvador Dali of sound.
Do you know, suddenly when you said that then, he made sense. He was a surrealist.
Absolutely, Jamaican surrealist, and they didn't even know what the word meant.
When you were growing up here as a kid, as you said, you had this, not dual identity.
Yeah, it was black and British. You know, I ain't going to deny that, man, you know.
But, you know, recently and rightly and correctly, we've had lots of discussions about this, and as we should, and lots of explorations of all of this.
You're going to get deep on me now. But
no, but I'm going to get probing a bit.
Yeah.
Was that an easy growing up? Was that, were those two halves in... Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Was growing up in a racist country easy? What do you think?
Well, that's why I'm asking.
Though, I tell you what, it made me the dick I am today. No, really.
No, the Don you are today.
No, really, because if you guys had been nice to me as a child, I probably wouldn't have done any of this shit. But from the get-go, I realised I had to work twice as hard as my white mates. And furthermore, as a youth, I was fat, four-eyed and black. So I had fuck all going for me.
I'm not sure you were fat. I've seen the pictures.
No, in my mind, funny enough, you know what's funny is now as I look at the pictures, I'm like, well, I weren't really that fat. But in my mind, back then, I was fat, four-eyed and black. And the only way I could compete, and when I say compete, you know, you've got to understand that, you know, when you're a young man, when I say compete, that word is all about one thing, getting a girl. I ain't gonna lie, you know, and because I couldn't compete on a physical level, I can't swim, I've never been to a football match, I had to get this together in my head. But when you're young, you know, it's really funny, it ain't hard to out-cool your white mates. You just gotta go, you gotta do something like, you know, tell the girls, yeah, I don't like football, I don't drink beer, and yes, I do watch subtitled films. And it's like, oh, he's cool. Boom, you know, I'm through the door.
When you got through the door,
Yeah.
when, you know, suddenly because of, you know, the Roxy and all of that, you're starting to get a reputation, you're starting to get...
Oh, no, I was a dick before that.
I remember going to Acme, so I know what you were like before that.
No, even before that.
Really?
I tell you, the person that you see before you now really was created in the Soul Boy days, to be honest, and on the dance floor.
Was you a mover,
What has this got to do with this fucking...
Nothing,
record,
but it's that... Is this all right? Are you enjoying it?
There was a time in my life, right, when I was the flashiest motherfucker in the world. I had a big fuck-off afro. And you know when you see those movies and there's three guys in the middle of the floor and they're busting the moves, and everyone's standing there.
That's you. Soul Train stuff.
Yeah. But after a while, the soul thing left a kind of distaste in my mouth because it got progressively bougie. And they started to look down on the kind of reggae brothers. And for some reason, the things that I was hearing with reggae seemed so much more appealing to this escapist shit that didn't seem to apply to what was going on to the streets of London. And then reggae comes with the kind of more militant, politicised messages. And I bailed on the whole soul thing, got rid of my afro and started growing dreadlocks in about, I know this, 1975. But it's all part of the journey of discovery, man. You know, you got to, you know, like I say, I'm standing before you now, but that whole thing of trying to work out what black and British meant as a youth was really confusing, and for me, didn't kind of come together until the end of the 80s, Soul to Soul. Yeah. You know, when Soul to Soul came along, I'm like, okay, that's black and British. Yeah. You know, we're taking props from America, props from Jamaica.
And they were funky dreads, and it also mixed the soul boy, the reggae, the punk, all of those elements.
Good idea of mine you had.
Which you'd already started doing.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Has Jazzy ever like come along and said, giving you props?
He doesn't have to. He knows. He fucking knows. They fucking know. Come on.
Ladies and gentlemen.
There's only one Don Letts.
I can talk to the only one Don Letts all evening, but that's only part of the entertainment of the evening, because you lot have got to do the rest, right? So normally in these situations, we say, wait for a microphone and be all gentle and polite. Nah, bollocks. Stand up and shout if you like. If you have a question for Don...
They could raise their hand.
You could certainly raise your hand. No, a little civility, I'm only kidding. So just, if you want to speak, raise your hand and talk in a voice that we can hear. Gentleman at the front.
Hold up.
Hold up.
What's this? What is this?
That was meant to be rum and coke.
No, it's spring water, too. Oh, you told me this was rum and coke.
We'll get you one, Don, don't you worry.
Sorry about that. Right, what were you saying?
Don, sit down and we'll let this gentleman speak.
Don, can you tell me how BAD came about?
Right, how did BAD come about?
I can do that. So Mick gets kicked out of his own band. And then one night I'm in a club with Mick and a friend of mine called Leo Easy Kill Williams, the bass player of Dreadzone. And Mick's standing between us, and he's a Rastaman. And Mick's standing between us, he's like, oi, we look like a band, we should start a group. And I'm like, Mick, I can't play anything. And he's like, well, don't worry about that. Neither could Paul when he joined The Clash. And it's true, they put coloured stickers on the fret of his bass to show him how to play. The difference between Paul Simonon and Don Letts is Paul Simonon eventually got rid of his stickers. I didn't. And that's how I started. Thank you for that, Jink. That's true.
Right then, who else would like to have a word with the band? Put your hands up, please. Come on, don't be shy. Gentleman over there first. Was the first one?
Good evening, both. Firstly, Don, thank you for turning me on to Because I used to come to Acme Attractions.
Did you? Did you go to Acme as well?
What a great place, eh? If I was going to go back to any time in my life, it would be there.
Well, you sold me, or Jeanette sold me, some blue jelly shoes.
Yeah.
And a beetle suit, but we won't go there.
Yeah.
What I'd like to ask, and I've only just bought the albums, I don't know what's on there, if you could go back to anybody, say from Elvis or Eddie Cochran going forward, that you could sit down with and talk to about maybe doing some dub version of their music, who would it be?
Cool. So just
George
in case
Clinton,
anyone...
maybe.
Really?
Yeah, it's like George.
Parliament.
Yeah, George Clinton or Sun Ra, man, but he's dead.
They're all dead.
George isn't dead.
No, Sun Ra's not dead yet.
Wayne Coyne.
Who?
Oh, yeah, Wayne Coyne. There you go.
Wayne Crane. That's an interesting one. For those, some of you might not know what Acme Attractions was. Back in 76, 5, what year was 75 it would have been. Yeah, you're right, I was 16. There were a couple of shops on the King's Road where you went to buy your clobber. And believe me, I loved a bit of schmutter. And there was Seditionaries or Let It Rock or Too Fussy You've Too Young to Die, or whatever Malcolm had called his shop that week.
That was one shop, folk, basically.
6. So that was down the other end.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple of others. Had Lloyd Johnson got his place yet? Lloyd was there. But for me, the coolest shop of them all was Acme Attractions, which was originally in the basement of Antiquarius. Is that right, Don?
That's right, yeah.
And this place was where you went to buy your jelly shoes, your plastic sandals. I bought my first mohair jumper there. I bought my first pair of kind of 60s straight leg jeans that you just couldn't get anywhere else at that time. And you walked in and they had a scooter in the shop, and they had some other bits, and they had Jeanette. Pictures of the Beatles, you're right, and people in kind of Beatles suits, and they had Jeanette, who is still one of the coolest people on earth, and they had him as the other shop assistant. And
I was the manager.
Don, you're a shop assistant. That was said on purpose. Oh, of course.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
I thought he was better looking, personally.
It's a pigment of your imagination.
Next question from the audience, please.
Yep, go on.
Don, the influence of Perry Henson's The Harder They Come and the effect it had on you, can you talk about that?
Let me think how to do that one. So, Don Letts, Black British Youth, trying to work out what the fuck that meant in the early 70s. Knew what we sounded like because we had a soundtrack, reggae. But there was no visual accompaniment other than cheap album covers and postcards of some dude riding a donkey on a beach in a straw hat. But that changed with the advent of two things: Bob Marley and Perry Hensel's film, A Harder They Come, which I went to see. And I was struck by, I guess, the power of cinema to inform, entertain, and inspire. And it was because of that film that I sort of dreamt of expressing myself in that medium, becoming a filmmaker. But in the early 70s, for a young black man, that was a ridiculous idea because it was an old white boys network. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, punk rock explodes with the DIY ethic, and when my white mates are picking up guitars, I wanted to pick up something too. I picked up a Super 8 camera and reinvented myself as Don Letts the filmmaker. So that's the power of Perry Hensel's A Harder They Come, Jamaica's most famous film. So much so, I forgot to mention, big up myself here. My first feature film, Dancehall Queen, shot in 1997, was a direct homage to Perry Hensel's film. And if you go to Jamaica now, if you ask anybody what's the biggest film in Jamaica, they're going to tell you Dancehall Queen. No, but and I think it's my proudest moment
No,
as
so
a
you
black
should
British
be.
kid to make a connection with the Jamaican people. Having said that, Perry's film is a far superior film. It's just way older than mine. But if you haven't seen it, it's an absolute must. Its soundtrack alone kind of took reggae to a whole nother level.
Is that the best film soundtrack in terms of a collection of songs of them all, do you think? I can't think of a better one.
It's right up there.
Yeah.
soundtrack to a movie. Saturday Night Fever's a fucking cool soundtrack.
Yeah,
I'm
that's pretty
sorry.
damn cool.
I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
pretty
sorry.
damn cool.
But
You're a Bee Gees fan.
not necessarily. That track and that moment. You know what's really funny about Saturday Night Fever? Do you know when that was #1? When that was all going on?
77.
December 1977.
Punk
The
rock
same-
prime time.
You know what I mean? Unbelievable. So I never told anybody I liked it back then.
No.
But
Nor,
how do they
nor
come?
did I.
Yeah, but how do they come? The soundtrack is it's a must-have.
In terms of filmmaking.
Hold on, we got to let them.
Sorry.
I like talking to people.
No, I'll come back to them in a second. I just wanted to say, in terms of filmmaking, do you still have stories that you want to tell?
Yeah.
In film.
Yeah. Yeah, any good filmmaker's always got something he wants to get off his chest. And right now, for me, that's a subject called Afrofuturism. But we'll talk about that another time because it's deep. Fucking deep. And it's the only way forward
I guess
for
we're
black
back
people.
to Sun Ra if we talk about that.
Exactly. But no, really, I think this whole thing of being street and all that stuff has become like almost another creative ghetto. You know, and I think it's time we sort of park that shit and not look to the gutter, but look to the stars, man. It's unexplored space. Pun intended.
Next question. You're a little murky, but I can't see your hands in the air. Gentlemen at the back, you might have to shout.
Go on. Oh, no, you got to fucking shout.
You got to really shout. Sound system culture and the importance of
Fuck, that's a whole another thing, isn't it?
Channel 1, Ashanti.
Sorry, it's fucking. I'm trying to think of keep it short, so I don't bore you all.
Don,
The
you
whole
never
sound
bored
system,
anybody.
the whole sound system thing, kind of emerged in Jamaica in the mid '50s because the radios are playing American stuff, and before sound systems emerged in Jamaica, it was bands used to travel around the island, and the sound systems emerged for two reasons, I guess. One, to play this new emerging music that was being created on the island, and because it was cheaper than paying for a goddamn band. But once again, Jamaicans turned what was sort of problematic into an art form, because sound system culture has really was the only vehicle that's taken Jamaican music not only around the world but keeps it proactive and moving forward. So yeah, no sound system, no reggae really, to be honest. And if you've never been to a proper sound system, again, a must experience. That was a crap answer, wasn't it? No, but you know, I could go and talk about sound system all day long. But no, big up the sound systems for because reggae still doesn't get its fair shake on the radio, you know. So you got to big up people like Manasseh and Channel 1 and Just Shaka if you want to hear the real thing at the volume that it needs to be played. Because the thing about reggae is you do need to feel it, man. You know, you can't be listening to it on your laptop and all this shit. I'm continuously telling people on my radio show, I don't even play as much dub as I like to because I know X amount of people ain't hooked up to a proper system. You know, do yourselves a favour.
That thing about
You need one for this album, I'll tell you.
that thing about the physicality of reggae is very important, isn't it? Because if you've never stood in a, you know, I don't know, 10 feet tall in a Brixton hall to quote a record, or you've never been, you know, with your back against a wall in W10 or whatever, feeling that bass pulsing through your stomach, you've never felt it. And it is music that you have to feel as much as anything.
It's not just about volume, you need to feel it.
Yeah, and you got to feel it in every sense, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Coming back to this record, because that's the reason we're here. And by the way, when we finish talking, Don's here. There's going to be signings. If people want to buy stuff, if you want to have a word with Don, if you want to get your record signed, that's exactly what's going to be happening. In terms of the music on here, the balance of kind of, you know, deep dub stuff and kind of more poppy kind of things and all that. Were you working it out like when you were doing a DJ set? Or?
Yeah, you design a flow. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to put these things into words, and if I could, everyone could do it, and I wouldn't have a gig. It's something that, you intuitively feel, man. You know.
And is it important? You know, I've got a vinyl copy here. I'm very lucky, and you can't have it. Something like that is designed to be put on and listened to. Because it strikes me that if music were designed now, you wouldn't have What's Going On, and you wouldn't have Exodus, and you wouldn't have... Do you know what I mean? Because people don't listen to things all the way through.
That's the downside of digital age.
Yeah.
fucked up thing about CDs, besides them killing album art, is the minute you could skip a track,
Yeah.
it killed the kind of, the completeness of an album.
Yeah.
Because back in the 60s and 70s, trust me, after a couple of spliffs, you ain't going to get up and you're like, the minute you could skip, that fucking was the downside of an
Yeah.
album as a total body of work. You know what I mean?
And it's even
then
worse
it became
now,
worse
isn't
now.
it?
As long as you can skip to the 3 singles, you know, and then it got worse to, you got to hook them with the first 30 seconds, you know, because it might come up on their, you know, no, it's fucked up.
So what I'm suggesting,
This is a total experience.
you buy this, put it on, double album, all the way through, because that's how those records are designed to be heard. Next question. Come on, stick your hand up.
I can't see anybody.
There, there's one at the back. I can hear. You'll have to shout. What new music?
Culture Clash Radio, 10 till 12 every Sunday night on the BBC 6. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. Name of names. I mean, there's so much.
It's really hard to remember names.
No,
isn't
no,
it?
you know what's
You're
funny?
our age.
After lockdown, there's such a proliferation of new music. I tell you what's really...
Mainly by females.
That's
Have you
the
spotted?
bollocks.
It's
That's the
all
thing.
women who
Yeah,
are
yeah,
doing
great.
the great stuff, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, I like this girl, Billy No Mates. I keep saying that because lyrically, I just like somebody that calls it as it is. So I like her.
There's tons. I mean, all those, you know, they're
Bill
just
Sims, Niana
Cherise and all of those girls. I mean,
there's a shed load of new stuff going on.
Yeah, there is.
And I'd highly recommend my show because a third of every one of my shows is brand new music. Seriously. And you can stream it whenever you like. All right. And I've got to big this up. I'm plugging myself. Lee Perry. I did a doc, a 2-hour doc, that I think's only up for about another week or so. And I will big this up because he deserves it. I did a 2-hour special on Lee Scratch Perry, and it's available via this thing, the BBC Sounds app. Anyway, the appliance of science.
Emily Capel. She's fantastic.
Dreadzone. Yeah, she's doing some stuff with them at the moment. Yeah. Yep.
A band I'd recommend is a band called the Goldborns. I don't know if you've heard them. They've worked with Mick. They're out of Goldborn Road. Really, and they're very much kind of dub rhythms, but with a punky guitar feel.
Liam Bailey.
It's great.
Anybody? Liam Bailey?
Liberty Champion was one of the best records of the year.
Fucking wicked.
Wonderful.
And no, but dig this. His album's called Ekundo.
Yeah.
And he's got another one out now. It's Elmy Shows
Ekundo
Affair
dub.
meets Liam Bailey, and it's called Ekundeo Inversions.
Yeah.
And I think it might be my album of the year already.
It's
and
a
the year
terrific
ain't
record.
finished.
No, I agree with you. He's a great talent.
And another thing that's floating my boat, so I've had time to think, there's this Mr. Jukes and Barney Artist. I like that album. I can't remember what it's called, but you asked. There you
Green
go.
Tea Peng is another one I would go
Yeah,
for.
yeah, yeah.
She's great,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think. She's really cool.
Right, any more questions? Don't feel
Gentleman
like...
at the front. Bit louder.
Track 31 on your album.
Oh, God, blimey.
Track...
Don't do
Crowd
Crowd bin.
No, hold up a second. Rewind Rasta. He said track 31.
I know.
Track 31. It ain't that many fucking tracks.
Track 5, side D,
No,
track
no.
5, Crown Bin.
Yeah, what about it anyway? How do you know about it? I've got a radio show, dude. I didn't know about Krang Bin, one of the most interesting discoveries of the last 5 years, whose album... See, I was going to impress you with trying to remember its title.
And then you forgot it.
Poe, what's the title of that album that I voted the #1 album of whatever year it was? Something El Mundo. Great album. It's got this very dubbed out aesthetic. They're a trio from Texas, and I'd highly recommend every single thing they've done.
And apparently Crown Bin is a Thai word.
I tell you what, though, I was like, so you're sitting in a room, right? You're trying to think of a band name, and you come up with this fucking...
That no one can
can't
pronounce.
I'm figuring they didn't think they had the career that they had, but they're stuck with it now. Because I'm still struggling with Krang Bin.
Yeah, no, right.
But no, highly recommended.
Really good
Highly
record.
recommended.
Yeah, I'm with that one as well. I'll give Don that one.
How come there's only men asking me questions? Thank you, girlfriend. I'll come to you in a minute, dude.
I see you did a remix of Omar's There's Nothing Like This.
Well, I did. See, so can I just say one thing before you ask that question? We've got to give props to the players and instruments on this record. I mean, I feel a bit bogus sitting here talking about other people's music, you know what I mean? But, sorry, go on.
So
Scientists.
Yes.
Yep.
There's nothing like this.
Yep.
I'm really glad about that. Omar, I mean, he's been around from when we were young.
Yeah.
He's been out there. He's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, he's wonderful.
Why isn't he the Idris Elba in England?
Well, that's simple. I can answer that question.
He's an OBE
I can
or
do
an
that, no.
MBE or one of them.
The answer's really simple.
What is it then?
One's a singer, one's a goddamn actor. Boom. No, not really, no. I tell you what you're saying is that Omar hasn't got the props he deserves. Absolutely, but that would, you know, sometimes that's reflected in the choice of the music that you release. But I'd highly agree with you. One of the UK's finest soul voices,
Fantastic
along with
singer.
David McAlmont. Nobody knows who the fuck he is. He's one of the finest soul voices in this country. Trust me. David McAlmont, are you up?
Yeah, of course. David McAlmont is a brilliant singer.
But you know what? At my age, I've come to realise that, you know, the real pioneers of music quite often don't get the props they deserve. It's the people that come along after and water it down, you know, they get to collect. And it's part of the dynamics of music, unfortunately, you know.
By the way, I'm with you completely on Omar. I mean, I think Omar
You lost
should
me
be
there.
right up there. I mean, he's a fantastic... He's also a lovely chap as well. I mean, he's just a...
Small in Carringtown a few weeks ago.
Right.
There was about 30 of us. It was fantastic.
Yeah, he's still playing little
Listen.
clubs. But that's out... We're lucky there because you can still see that.
Listen, that record, was it Nothing Like This?
Yeah.
Increased the black population of the UK.
I suspect, Don, it was all colours.
Anyway, anybody else? Oh, we said we do you, didn't we?
All right, you've got to pick one gig.
No, come on, that's kid stuff. For fuck's sake. All right, I'll pick a gig. All right, let me throw a few at you. Bob Marley at the Lyceum. You know, that was a trip because I went and met him afterwards.
Clash at the Rainbow?
Clash, all the Clash gigs.
Yeah.
Pistols at Nashville.
Yeah.
Prince, Madison Square Garden. Sheb Khaled at the Festival Hall.
BAD at Shepherd's Bush.
Yeah, you know, I'm fucking... You can't ask an old man that question, dude. But I will tell you this story, since you've bloody asked. So, I'm 14 years old, right, at school. Grammar school, by the way. Fucking smart dude.
Me too.
And a rumour...
Me too.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And a rumour goes around the school. There's some band playing at the Young Vic tonight and they need an audience. So
who this
after
is.
school, I go to the Young Vic to see some band playing. I walk in to see the goddamn Who. I'm in my school uniform, right? I'm 14 years old. And they're doing what you call a full production rehearsal. So they're not just jamming and going through the moves. They're doing what they're going to do when they go out live on the Who's Next tour. Dry ice, lasers, Townsend doing the windmill. I'm 15 feet from the stage. I can see the whites of Keith Moon's eyes. And that gig alone was the one that opened the door to a world that I knew I wanted to be part of. I didn't necessarily want to be in a band, didn't want to be a singer. I just knew that whatever was unfolding in front of me, I wanted more of this. And I'd like to think that I'd stepped through that door. And yeah, I'm a product of that moment, because that singular moment was the most mind-blowing thing of my whole life and set me off on this path. You know what's funny is, what time is it? I'm fed up. You know when you're 14, right, you're at school and you have this thing where you have to opt for certain subjects?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And at that age, I was really good at art and woodwork and all this stuff, but it came time I had to opt what subjects I was going to pursue to O-level. And my parents made me drop all the artistic subjects because they said black people can't make money from art, God bless them. And they made me take up technical drawing, physics and chemistry. But they didn't know that I'd just seen the goddamn Who. And it was during my... What were they, O-levels? I don't know. During these tests that I had my moment of rebellion. Because for chemistry, what did I write? A chemistry I wrote for my O-levels. The chemist I am not to be, that I clearly state, because I've got a splitting headache and I cannot concentrate. Bosh, I handed that in. For technical drawing, I drew a nude woman and I wrote underneath, curves are better than straight lines. Bosh, I handed that in. Quit school and headed off to the King's Road, Chelsea, to seek my fame and fortune. So that's what music can do for you.
And I'm very glad it did. Ladies and gentlemen. Don Letts, the Rebel Dread, the man behind version Excursion. If you haven't got yourself a copy yet, get one. He'll sign it. He's up there doing all of that stuff. And one more appreciation for the man who is the Dom.
Thank you. Thanks for giving a shit. Right, give me 5.